everybody. I'm Kaelem Moniz, and happy Canada Day. On July the 1st, in 1867, the four provinces, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, were united into the Dominion of Canada. And while we weren't quite independent just then, and we had many provinces and territories yet to go, that was the time when Canada became possible. So happy Canada Day. Well, we have no one better to celebrate Canada Day with than the Honourable Jean Augustine, who is the first Black woman Canadian to be a member of Parliament and a cabinet minister, whose origin story begins in Grenada as a Girl Scout, continued as a teacher in Toronto, and then obviously reached the cabinet office as the Minister for Multiculturalism and the Status of Women. Along the way, Minister Augustine has also served as president of the Metro Toronto Housing Authority and also national president of the Canadian Congress of Black Women. She has also served on the board of governors of York University, Sick Kids Hospital, the Stephen Lewis Foundation, and even the Toronto Harbourfront Corporation. Her motion in the House of Commons created February as Black History Month in Canada. Minister Augustine, it is a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. Happy Canada Day.
Well, thank you, Caleb, and happy Canada Day to you, to all the scouts and those in scouting in Canada, and to all Canadians. It's a great anniversary. It's a great time for celebration. So I'm happy to be on this program at this time.
Well, Minister Augustine, I know that this Canada Day, many are reflecting on what it means to belong in Canada. I mentioned our founding in 1867, but much has changed since then. I wonder, how has our country, in your mind, become much more than the Canada of 1867, and what does Canada Day mean to you personally?
Well, personally, I think that Canada is a work in progress.
Hmm.
That we're not finished yet because the goals and the ideals and the principles and all the things that went into or coming together as a confederation and those goals are still yet to be completely accomplished. Our relationship with our indigenous peoples, our relationship with people that have come from all around the world, including myself, the issue of immigration and immigrants and the full participation in Canadian society. I think that we are, well, as I said, a work in progress. For me, coming into Canada in 1960 and looking at Canada then and Canada now, and the other day I was counting with some young people the number of prime ministers and opposition leaders and leadership individuals in leadership that I've seen over the 60 something years that I've been in this country. And so we can see the issue of national identity brought forward, especially at this particular point in time when there are threatened voices that speak to other forms of unification with other places. But the issue of the historical significance, because I think as we celebrate Canada Day, it's that historical, who we were, who we are, who we propose, and who we have affirmed that we're going to be, despite everything else that's happening in the world. I think the civic pride that we see, the elbows up, as it were, that we hear about, the fact that we want to bring the trophies home, and we list those who represent us in national places, and the pride that we feel as Canadians when they come home and when they share with us. It's also the time that coming from the June the 21st, when we talk about Indigenous peoples, and when we look at what we have agreed upon as reconciliation and full involvement of everyone in our society. And the fact that, scouts and scouting and guides and guiding, all of those things help to build that civic and national pride and also help us to move forward as the kind of country that we say we are, a fair, a just, and inclusive, a multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic society. And that's the pride of Canada. And that's when I think of Canada, I walk around with that pride as I put on my red t-shirt to attend maybe a ceremony, not maybe, but to attend a ceremony where we see new Canadians being inducted and becoming um, saying that they swear that they will uphold the principles, the policies, the whatever of Canada.
Well, Minister Augustine, as you mentioned, you yourself are, of course, an immigrant coming from Grenada. And I wonder if you might discuss the perspective of Canada Day from the perspective of an immigrant, obviously, as someone who has not always been to Canada. Was your first Canada Day, was it much of a surprise? Was it easy for you to just join Canadian society? I wonder if you might discuss that for a little bit.
Well, joining Canadian society is a bit of a challenge,
Mm.
especially for someone coming from a geographical and climatic conditions and
Ah,
everything that's so different from Canada.
right.
But at the same time, when I came as a British subject. The
Mm.
island that I'm from, where I was born, Grenada, and many parts of the Caribbean, were all we were all British subjects. I came with a British passport,
Mm.
and and so that first Canada Day was again a reminder of that heritage of Canada, reminder of that those constitutional rights that there were, and also I was happy to join in the celebration and remember that. Um, 19 when we celebrated the 100th anniversary of Canada's Constitution with the Caribbean community. I
Mm.
celebrated through what we call Caribana at the time. And that is a big festival where we got out on the street and we waved the flag, not only the flag from where we came, but we waved the Canadian flag as we celebrate the anniversary of of Canada. So Canada Day has always been a great one for me. And over the years, in the area where I am at Kaelem, we have a huge park that's called Centennial Park. And
Mm.
that again has a history connected to Canada. And in that park, there is always um, a big fun fair, as it were, a rib fest. And part of that day of celebration, new Canadians are welcomed, usually between 30, 40 new Canadians. And the pride as they wave the little Canadian flag, as they receive their certificates, as they stand up and acknowledge, as they sing the Canadian anthem as a first time Canadian. I mean, those are all really uplifting, exhilarating, energizing. And I go back to what I said earlier, that civic pride, that
Mm.
national pride in the country that we call home.
Well, Minister Augustine, I want to briefly talk about obviously your tenure in Parliament. You mentioned Centennial Park. Of course, you represented a riding in Etobicoke for many
Make
years.
sure.
Etobicoke Lakeshore, yeah. And in your motion in the 90s in Parliament designated February as Canada's Black History Month, as I mentioned. You also moved to erect a statue of the famous five suffragettes who fought to give women the vote
Mhm.
and that's on Parliament Hill. Folks at home, they can go visit it. I wonder, as the first Black woman to be a member of Parliament and, of course, a member of Cabinet, this Canada Day, I wonder how you reflect on those accomplishments, obviously both with pride, but also with weight.
Well, not only with, I wanted to start with the issue of with pride as I represented the constituents of Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Mm.
It is important. And I say this all the time because I think it's important for me to say, I don't know of any country in the world where I could have entered as an immigrant do domestic work as a starting point and work my way through the system, through um, to reach the if I want to call it the heights of where one can be a full participant in Canadian society. And so when I look at the time I came, when I looked at my early, training as a teacher, etc., being in the classroom, teaching social studies, and
Mm,
wanting to talk about Indigenous peoples, wanting to talk about treaties and rights and obligations and agreements with the Crown, I had no reference in
mm.
any of the textbook that I was teaching grade 7, grade 8.
Wow.
I saw nothing in the textbooks about Black Canadians,
Mm,
except things like the Underground Railroad, and that was it. So
mm.
I had to do a lot of research myself. I had to learn. It was almost like train the trainer. I
Yeah.
had to learn and then teach what I learned and
Wow.
and take what I knew and imprinted that on the curriculum modules that came from the Ministry of Education.
Mm,
And so when the opportunity came in the Parliament of Canada to look around and say, where is the niche? Where can I find my place in that room, in that hall built by men to do men's work?
mm,
And how do I bring my whole self to there and look at some of the issues that I addressed? And of course, the issue of education is important. The fact that young people should know their history. And when you look at some of the social issues that face African Canadians, the racism, the discrimination, the microaggressions, all those things that happen to, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that young people need to be assured of their own history,
mm,
assured of themselves, and others should know. And something I say all the time is that Black history, to talk about Black Canadians, is really to talk about Canada's history, because you cannot talk about one section of Canada's history or one set of peoples in Canadian history and not look at the entire realm of those who represent and who make up who we are as Canada. And so the motion was very simple, Caleb, very simple. It says that African Canadians were here since 1603. It said that we were part of the building of Canada. It said that we've been making contribution to the nation. And it also said that we are a diverse African Canadian community. Some of us have been here for nine or more generations. Some of us have come lately. Some of us come from different parts of the world, continental Africa, Caribbean, Europe, from all over the world. And so we are a diverse African Canadian society, community in Canadian society. And we're also being contributed. And I call on my colleagues to let's make that history known and let's declare February as Black History Month in Canada. So that's that part of the history that I'm very proud of because it started with almost, I can say, nothing. And then you can see how the notion of African Canadian history, Black history, is now throughout the country from coast to coast. In corporate Canada, in religious settings, in schools, and educational and entertainment. February is really Black history is highlighted in February. Not that it shouldn't be throughout the rest of the year,
mm,
but the focal point is the month of February. The issue of the famous five. I had to learn about that. There was nothing in the books about those suffragettes and those women who fought to make sure that women could be appointed as senators and be in places that women didn't have the right to be in those places. And so when I learned about that, and when I talked, when I talked to women's organizations and I work with women, it was important for us to highlight that historical part that unknown or hidden gem of information about those early women who went all the way through the courts in the country, ended up in England to where our constitution was at the time,
Right.
to appeal the fact that women were persons, and
Yeah.
women were persons, and the Declaration of Women were persons in law,
Right.
and that women had the right to be in every part of Canadian society. So I feel very pleased about that, about those two things, and I see them as kind of legacy items. And I see those. I know that the Scouts and the Girl Guides, and I've had opportunity to talk to different conferences here and there, and it's important information for young people to have,
Mhm.
both Black and everyone of every background.
Well, I want to just quickly say, Minister, you've mentioned there something briefly that not many people might know is that women in Canada were given the vote not by our Supreme Court, but by the British Supreme Court, their JCPC, the Privy
That's right.
Council. And,
Yes,
and that is something that when I learned that, I was a little bit shocked. But this is something that we can use Day for, is to learn more about our history.
that's right.
And of
Yes,
course, this is something, as you were an elementary school teacher,
that's right.
today you have a high school named after you. A love of working with kids is something that you have in common with
Yes,
many of our scout leaders across the country.
yes.
I wonder what advice you might have for them on being role models for young people.
I think it's important that each one of us see ourselves as having something that we could contribute to society, that each
Mm.
one of us has something that we could share with others. We sometimes think we have to do big things, that you have to take big projects, but it's the everyday, the one-on-one, the relationship with others. The fact that as a young person, it is important for you to join to participate in something. And many people start with being part of a team, in with sporting endeavors, with scouting endeavors, the fact that there are opportunities to speak about climate issues, to go into outside of especially I'm speaking from Toronto, so I'm talking about young people who have to leave the urban environment and go out into the areas where they can have the smell and the taste of uh, of of the earth, and to recognize the importance of all of those things for us. And I think young people are very much engaged if we give them the opportunity. I remember, Kaelem, when we first started talking about the 3 Rs: reduce, recycle, rework.
Mm.
It was the young people in the classrooms who were bringing those messages home, who were saying to them, you can't throw this here, you have to put it there. And so we know that from the youth are the ones who make the changes. And I have a center now for girls, and we do things like cooking, and we talk about food and health and mental health, etc. And it is those young people who go home with the stories, who tell their parents how to do things, a conversation they've had. And so I think that young people can help us to change the world. I think they need to know that, and we need to share that with them. And we need to ensure that those young people have opportunities, and
Mm.
those opportunities provide them with the kind of thinking that can say, I can take a risk.
Mhm.
I can, because risk taking, sometimes young people are avert to taking the risk, unsure as to what would happen. We have to build their confidence. And when I look back to my younger self, I keep saying, I'm glad I had my confidence built by a grandmother who said, way before Obama said it, yes, you can. Go girl. And so I think we have to instill in our young people we have to instill this idea that they need to be adventurous, that they
Mm.
have to take risk, that they have to participate, that they have to find mentors, find people that they can look to and ask question those people as to how did you do it? How did you get there? What is it I need to do? Can you give me some help, some advice? And not be afraid to do that, although it is taking risk to talk to someone,
Right.
ask for direction.
Well, Minister, then, thank you obviously so much for being with us today. It's a real pleasure to speak with you. I want to ask a final question that's sort of a flip of the first one. And I know we briefly mentioned it through this interview, but I suppose a good way of tying it off for our scouts across the country who are watching this is what piece of advice would you share to your younger self or just to Canadians around this country who are looking to make a real difference in their communities?
Kalim, sadly, we are in challenging times.
Mm,
The news is not good right now. You turn the television on, and we see wars and conflicts, and it is difficult for young people to recognize that the world was not meant to be the way it is, and that they have a responsibility to make sure that we make changes in that world. What would I have said to my younger self? Was that the question?
yes,
As
that's right. Yeah.
my younger self said, look, you go to Canada and and it is going to be cold and it is going to be challenging and it's going to be a place where people will not acknowledge who you are, etc. And but seriously, I would say to my younger self, take risks,
Mm,
look for mentors, join, be part of community. Because where I am today is the result of the fact that I've always embraced community. I've always embraced participation. I've always embraced teamwork. I've always embraced the fact that I can make a difference. I can make a change. And there is an old saying about don't leave a place. If you leave a place the way you found it, or you leave an organization, or you leave a classroom, or you leave wherever the way that you found it, that is not really good
mm.
because you should have made a difference and you should be able to look back and say, this change has occurred simply because I was here.
Wow. Well, Minister, there are two policies of scouting. The first is do a good turn every day, and then a second one is leave no trace, unless that trace is to leave it as better than when you found it. So
Exactly.
I think your message lines up perfectly with what we try and do here with scouting.
Exactly, exactly. And this Canada Day, as we celebrate, let us remember that notion that we have a place in the world, whether it's on a national scale, as leaders work on our behalf, but we also have to be supportive of the fact that we have to make the world a better place. And we have a responsibility as Canadians to do this.
Well, Minister, thank you so very much for sharing your time, your stories, with your advice with us this Canada Day, and of course, to everyone across the country, happy Canada Day.
Happy Canada Day!
Our next episode of Profiles in Canada is going to be next week, and I can't wait to bring you the story of another great Canadian who uses their talents to the full for the common good. Thank you, Minister, for joining us. Thank you, everybody at home. Great to see you. Until next time.
Thank you, Kaelem.